Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the Hacking Evolution. Tonight, we're going to explore the life of the hacker, and we're going to talk a little bit about the cultural shift of what we are seeing in terms of companies embracing the help from hackers instead of being scared of hackers like it used to be. And yeah, so my name is Michiel. Here on the panel, I have Alyssa and Jack. They're two hackers on the HackerOne platform. Before we get into the questions and we kick things off, who here has experience with running a hacker-powered security program, like a bug bounty program or a vulnerability disclosure program? Show your hand if you do have experience with it. All right, I see a few hands. Okay, so I hope after tonight we all leave with a little bit better understanding about what hacker-powered security can do and also what hackers can do in terms of helping you with security. So without further ado, Jack, you kind of got into this hacking by accident. So how do you get into hacking by accident?
So yeah, I got into hacking when I was a sophomore in high school, so that was about 4 years ago. I was looking at a financial website and noticed that there's a way to send a negative amount of money to other users that were on the site. So instead of sending money to them, it would steal the money from their account and give it to me. So that was pretty bad. I didn't know much about security then, but fortunately that company had a bug bounty program. So they would pay hackers for finding vulnerabilities and telling them about it. So I worked with them to get it fixed. I got paid for finding that, and that really just sparked my interest in security. So from there, I started learning more and eventually found HackerOne and have been participating in bug bounty programs since then.
Cool. And Alyssa, you started when you were just 11 years old. So how did you get into it?
Well, I started into hacking when during middle school because I was basically the school gave us a laptop, and I wanted to play games on it, and the software on the computer wouldn't allow it. So that kind of led to me trying to figure out how to bypass or circumvent it. That sort of started the spark with wanting to learn more about security and just the general just of like bypassing or hacking stuff in general. Eventually, I did find HackerOne through researching about bug bounty program because I learned through Google's bug bounty program that this type of thing exists where you can be rewarded for hacking stuff and reporting it, and that's just sort of how it all started for me.
Cool. So Jackie, you mentioned that you found a vulnerability in that company where you could kind of basically steal money, but they did have a bug bounty program. So like, have you ever had an experience where you found something and there was no way for you to report the vulnerability?
Yeah, so all of the hacking I do is on programs that have either a vulnerability disclosure program or a bug bounty program, just because the legal nature, you can only legally do this if you're authorized to. But with that being said, there's always the case where you accidentally become aware of a vulnerability on a website, and it's your responsibility to report to them and help get fixed. But they don't have a bug bounty program, or they don't have established channels for people to report vulnerabilities to them. So I have experienced that, and it can be very difficult to make contact with the company. And that's exactly why it is so important that every company at minimum establishes a vulnerability disclosure policy so that hackers can report vulnerabilities to them. It can be as simple as just an email address, like security@yourcompany.com, but just some way that hackers can get in touch with you if you find something, because there's people testing these systems, whether you like it or not, and we have to engage with the people who are wanting to help and make it as easy as possible for them to do that.
Yeah. So, Alyssa, you grew up with bug bounties, and I imagine that's kind of like it's different, right? You're hacking legally, and then like how do your peers and how does your family kind of see that? Like,
my family was always quite hesitant at first because it was just sort of the notion of the word hacker had always been synonymous with something that's illegal and something that's more destructive in nature and something that's as beneficial. It sort of changed through as I've have achieved hacking different companies legally and having stuff to show for it and showing that it is a viable career and that's a viable thing that's actually legitimate and not something that is, well, malicious or anything like that in nature. And it's sort of their notion of it changed as, well, the time went on, and they realized it's not really something that is destructive or illegal. It's something that basically anyone can do, that anybody could get into, and anybody can, help out companies or whatever that needs, additional eyes on their programs or websites.
And Jack, you're not only just a hacker, you also have helped a few programs launch, and also like not even in like the very progressive technological innovation areas, but in government and education. So what can you tell us about that?
I've worked, so this past summer I worked at the Pentagon's Defense Digital Service on their Hack the Pentagon program. So I initially participated in that as a hacker 3 years ago when it launched, and after participating in a few other of those, including Hack the Air Force, which I ended up placing first in. I then joined the team that ran that, the Defense Digital Service. And it's viewed as kind of a SWAT team of nerds within the Pentagon. So it's a group of people who work to make technology better within the DoD. And in my time there, it really was just great to see that change is possible within government. I never expected that I would wind up working in government, but when the Pentagon is inviting people to find vulnerabilities in its systems and it's paying them for it, it really just shows how much perceptions are changing and how people are beginning to realize that the only way you can become more secure is if you're aware of it and you work to become better. So I did that. And I also started school at Stanford last year. And in my first year there, I worked with them to launch a bug bounty program to pay students and faculty for finding flaws in Stanford systems. So that launched in January. Since then, we've found, I believe, over 50 vulnerabilities and paid out over $10,000 in rewards. So it's great not only to help secure the university, but also to engage students who might not have a background in security and get them thinking about it and helping them get more familiar.
What are some of the industry shifts that we have seen that kind of make this kind of hacker-powered security more accepting and more companies are more tolerant towards hackers?
Yeah, I think that we're really just seeing a shift in the way that hackers are perceived. Maybe say even 10 years ago, a hacker would always be someone who's malicious. They would be a criminal, someone who is working to steal money or exploit systems, something like that. But given that we're seeing that hackers are really something that can help and something beneficial for a lot of companies and organizations, I think that everyone from big companies, small companies, governments, with the Department of Defense, everyone is seeing that this is the way to go forward and are actually testing their security to become more secure. So I think that by doing this, there's people eventually will get over the stigma that all hackers are bad, and it's happening. And I think with time, companies will only become more transparent with their security, and that'll be better for us all.
So more transparency is better.
Oh yeah, it definitely is.
So then what motivates you to hack? If this is now kind of a legal way to explore security, what is the motivation to hack?
For me, it's mainly just to continue learning, and it's always been something that's always been interesting because I've learned a lot through hacking and it also helps provide a way to, as a career development, and to help explore possibilities of working in security more in different ways. And it's just sort of always been something that and as well as just generally the money as well, because it's actually quite well too.
Yeah, I would say likewise. It is if you tried it, it is just something that's fun. There's systems are designed to be secure, and if you find them bypassed, then that's something significant. That's something that the company really cares about, and something that is really exciting to find. So that's how I got into hacking, and the primary reason I keep doing it. There's also, I think it's great for getting into security, for learning. That's how I got started in security and now really love it. So between that, the challenge of doing it, and you also can get paid for it. So yeah, that's why I hack.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because like in the model of bug bounties, of course, you can make money for finding vulnerabilities and reporting them responsibly. But we're kind of quickly glancing over that you can make a lot of money with this, and it's interesting to see that it's not the main motivator to hack.
Yeah, it's always a very interesting challenge because just as Jack said, it's something that's always interesting when you're able to break something that the company has put a lot of work into securing, but they realize they may have overmissed something. They thought they missed something crucial along the way. It's always interesting to see how the company responds to it and sees how they messed up. A lot of times, the companies are actually quite thankful and very intrigued by how you're able to do and how you're able to exploit this, how you're able to exploit their system.
How would you describe the feeling of finding a vulnerability when you finally crack something? What is that feeling like?
I think, yeah, it is just really exciting to find that. With the first vulnerability I found, I just had this feeling of I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but it was really bad. And just knowing that the impact it could have could be enormous. We've seen with every data breach, just the stakes are growing higher and higher. So being able to identify something that could possibly be exploited and work with the company to fix it is just a great feeling. So I think it's, at the end of the day, it's always about making companies, making organizations more secure, and it feels really great to contribute to that.
It really is. It's just, yeah. When you're able to find something, but you're also able to help work with them to just patch the issue and figure ways to remediate any more issues that they might not have thought about because it might be a root issue or something like that as well.
Anyone can tell anything about before this all existed? What was the go-to way of learning about security and learning how to hack?
So yeah, I think for both of us, it probably was, well, fortunately, before we got into hacking, but from what I've heard from 10 years ago, a long time ago, there just weren't options like this back then, because the best you could do was, I don't know, read a book and learn about security from there. But if you actually wanted to test systems, your options were very limited. Whereas now you can look at pretty much any company and they want you to hack them and they'll pay you for it. So just the potential to learn and to learn by doing is probably the best way with hacking. So yeah, I think so many more people are going to be exposed to security and are able to get into it. So I think that's something that will be really powerful with the model of the bug bounty and vulnerability disclosure policies, that more new hackers will come in and the security field will grow as a result.
There's also the fact that there's a lot more researchers publishing write-ups, blogs, information, stuff, additional material that can help students, help people who are just learning or people who have been in the industry for quite a while but haven't never broached into security in general. And there's lots for people to learn from now.
What is your favorite type of vulnerability to go after, if you have one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say one of the more interesting ones that I've found over and over again is called a race condition. And all that is that when you're, say, performing some action on a website, if you perform it many times at once, the website may not be properly set up to handle it and might respond in a way that you could exploit. So one of the initial vulnerabilities I found, in addition to sending negative amounts of money, was a race condition in sending money. So I could send money back and forth to myself over and over again and exceed my account balance. And doing that, I could get tons of money in my account. Unfortunately, this site didn't let me keep that money, but if they did, it would have been a lot. So that's interesting, and it happens on all sorts of companies. I was looking at Slack. They have a feature where, if you stop paying for your account midway, then they refund you that portion of the balance, and that was also vulnerable to a race condition. So pretty soon I had a couple $1,000s in my Slack account in credits. which they also took away. That's the trend. And even with HackerOne, so HackerOne recently introduced a new feature that would pay hackers a small bounty for testing a fix for a vulnerability. And I also found that I could get paid out multiple times. And I didn't even realize it worked until a couple of weeks later when Michiel messaged me and said, "Hey, I think you found a vulnerability here." And it was then that I realized that that was also a vulnerability. And HackerOne did let me keep the money I got, and they also gave me a bounty on top of that. So yeah, it can pop up in lots of different places, and yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Race conditions. Alyssa, do you have any favorite vulnerability type?
That's kind of hard. I think one of my favorites have always been server-side request forgery vulnerabilities. Basically, any sort of website will have, some website will have the ability to perform a URL request, whether that be to fetch an image from a remote server or to download a file or something like that. With server-side request forgery, you are able to tamper with that request and perform an internal request to the server, and this could allow you to query internal administrative panels or access credentials or things that are supposed to be only kept on the inside of the server and not externally facing at all. Yeah.
Cool. And like, since we are here at AWS, how do we see like the adoption of more cloud services change the types of vulnerabilities we're finding and seeing?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely from my experiences, there are some common misconfigurations that people can find that tend to happen when you're using cloud services. So one example is with AWS S3. Sometimes companies may misconfigure their S3 buckets so that files are publicly available, and then in that case could lead to data being exposed. So just one case where using this common software leads to kind of common vulnerabilities across different companies. But with that being said, using the cloud, using AWS, it really is just, I would say in a sense, not very different from traditional security in that you can be more secure or you can be less secure using these kinds of services, but there's just different things you have to pay attention to, different things you have to make sure are configured properly, and at the end of the day, you have to understand how everything works and where the potential for exploitation is. So by doing that, it could be used for a tool to become more secure, but there could also be pitfalls along the way.
Yeah, there's also the other thing where there's a lot of documentations as well, and a lot of times if there are a major issue with the platform itself, that might lead to insecurities to it. A lot of times the cloud platform will push will push your updates or patches to it as well if there is a very common issue that is being exploited or seen. One example would be with AWS with AWS hosted services, there's an internal API service that would give credentials if you're able to perform a server-side request for a vulnerability, for example. As a result of this, Amazon has pushed updates to it to make it more secure and provide options for developers to further secure their internal networks. So there's a good bit of uniformity with how you are able to secure the cloud services.
So how do you decide which company to hack on? There's so many different companies that allow you to legally hack them. How do you decide kind of where to go after? What makes a program great?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are just so many different programs out there. Funny how just few years that can change so rapidly. Now there's just so many programs that want you to hack on them. I'd say that the main factors I use in evaluating to participate in a bug bounty program are, for instance, the communication of the company. So a big factor is are they responsive to when you report a vulnerability, and does it seem like they actually care about their security and they really value you providing feedback and helping to make them more secure. So that's a big part that I look for. Another is the legal aspect. So this is inherently risky. There's laws that are against hacking. Fortunately, with bug bounty programs, It's companies giving you access, authorizing you to find vulnerabilities in their systems, but there is always the legal risk that you have to keep in mind. So looking at how companies have treated researchers in the past, 99.9% of companies work well and are friendly to hackers, but there are some cases where it doesn't go so well. So keeping that in mind and seeing if they have a legal safe harbor. So if they explicitly state that your actions are authorized under the relevant laws and that they want you to be doing this. So I value that as well. And of course, the bounty amounts also, I would say, aren't the primary factor, but can incentivize looking at certain areas or certain companies.
For me, it would be roughly the same. Safe harbor policy or a rather welcoming legal policy that doesn't necessarily entrap, it wouldn't necessarily entrap a user, as that has been a problem with very few programs where there's been problems with companies basically pursuing legal action against hackers who have followed their rules, the rules of their program. As well as the communication and generally how they work with the hacker community and how they are handling vulnerabilities and reports. To a certain degree, the bounty tables and sort of how they value out vulnerabilities and more properly. But yeah.
So like bounties, the bounty structure is not the most important thing you factor in deciding where to hack. What is an attractive bounty? Like, how do you identify a bounty table that is too low or like looks good to you?
Yeah, so I don't have like any set amounts that I look for or minimums or anything. I think it's mostly just about at the end of the day if I'm like enjoying doing this, working with this company, making them more secure. And I feel like they properly value what I'm doing. So yeah, I think that it's worse if a company, say, doesn't appreciate what you're doing or acts unfairly when they're determining bounty amounts than if they're upfront and state, like, this is what we can give, and you work on it that way. So I think that, yeah, overall, I'm just really looking to like have a positive experience, and that's usually independent of the bounty amounts. So yeah, I think that mostly I focus just on like overall being able to work well with the companies.
Yeah, I would say the same. A positive experience with the company tends to far outweigh the bounty tables. If the responses to the vulnerability and all that, it tends to motivate me to continue hacking on them and looking for more vulnerability and digging deeper. I've worked on a vulnerability disclosure program multiple times for the Department of Defense, and that program is non-rewarding, but I quite like how the engagements are, and it's quite fun. So I usually continuously dig on their program.
And like most of the hacking happens at home, behind a desk, behind a computer, wherever you're sitting. But both of you also have been to live hacking events. What could you tell the audience about that?
Yeah, I think these live hacking events, HackerOne has thrown a lot of them. They're really cool because you get to go all over the world. Some that I've done recently include Singapore, London, across the United States as well. And they're just a really great experience to meet other hackers, to be able to learn from them, collaborate on a common target, as well as actually meeting the company, the people behind the bug bounty programs who are on the other end receiving your reports. So it's just great to be able to all be in the room together and work on one common target. So I think that, they are really valuable. Have had, some of the best findings at these events when you're working with someone and both sharing information. You can really learn from each other and be a lot more productive than if you were just alone. So, I think these events work really well, and it's just great to meet everyone and keep coming back and seeing people again.
Provide a very unique experience to work with the company directly and being able to work on vulnerabilities that you may have questions on or might need a bit of help to further understand how their internal structure works, and maybe working off ideas that you might have on how something might be vulnerable and you also have them like watch you as you work on the thing and see what if there's an issue that might be too sensitive to work on without supervision on it, so to speak. And it really offers a chance, as Jack said, to collaborate with other hackers to further work on one issue or multiple issues, and to further provide a way to expose more vulnerabilities through a collaborative space.
What is the bug you're the most proud of that you've ever discovered?
Yeah, I think that I would say, yeah, that depends a lot more on the impact that could have. Let's see. Yeah, not sure I could say a specific one, but I think just every bug that I find that you can tell the company really values, and it could have, say, been really catastrophic if it had been exploited. Just knowing that you help to prevent that and you help to make that company more secure is just really why I do this. So I think that, yeah, it's not just one specific one, but time and time again, companies have flaws that are out there, and by helping them to avoid, say, being the next data breach, it just is really great to know that you've contributed to making them more secure. So yeah, I think that I'm just really proud of all of the ones that significantly improve the security of a company and allow them to view their security from a new lens.
For me, there isn't really one either. Have been many bugs that have been really interesting, and it's mostly been how responses from the companies and how intrigued they are or excited they are for how I was able to perform certain actions or able to exfiltrate certain data. It's always been really just exciting how it's always been exciting just to show work I put into working on their programs and just exposing these issues that could massively cause breaches or severe monetary loss for the companies themselves.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about vulnerabilities and bugs, but I see an interesting question from the audience. And what is a hacker? How do you define the word hacker?
Yeah, I would say that that definition is definitely changing, and I think a good definition now is just someone who, I think HackerOne had this up at one point on their website, someone who works to creatively overcome challenges. So just having a different mindset, looking at things from a different angle, really just encompasses all aspects of hacking. And there's so many different areas that you can get into. But yeah, I think fundamentally it's just being able to look at a system and see where its possible flaws are, or come up with ideas of what might be going wrong, and then just having that curiosity of trying to find flaws. So yeah, I think that it's no longer the days of a hacker is a criminal or a hacker is someone who does something bad, but a hacker is someone who's creative. They can use it for good or for bad, but that's independent of their ability to creatively look at a system and identify flaws.
Yeah, hacking has always, the term of hacker has always been changing, and a lot of people would be considered hackers themselves as being a hacker is more or less being somebody who can creatively solve an issue. It can be applied to everything from hacking websites to just hacking a puzzle, or something that is challenging or something that is complex that requires a bit of thinking to work out.
So in the most dictionary definitions of the word hacker, they use the word criminal, and they kind of add this negative connotation to it. Do we all agree that we should kind of get rid of that word?
Definitely.
Good. Cool. So what kind of advice do you have for startups that are looking to get started with a bug bounty program?
Yeah, I would say that just first of all, the most fundamental thing to have for any company, regardless of its size, regardless of what it does, is a vulnerability disclosure program. Because, like I said before, there's people looking at your stuff every day, and we need to let the people who are trying to help you actually help you. So using a vulnerability disclosure program, I'd say, is the fundamental aspect every company would have. And I think that once you want to get more serious about security, a bug bounty program is a great way to really dive deeper and see what you're doing wrong. So I think that launching a bug bounty program is a great way to identify flaws on your systems and see where you can improve. But I think it's important to take that information and really go beyond just what you get from there and really try to improve how code is developed across an organization, work to make sure that developers understand basic security risks and have security people that are always looking out and trying to, not just once a product's been launched, but throughout the entire development process, really work on making software as secure as it can, because preventing something right when it's being written is a lot easier than once it's out there or once it's been exploited. So yeah, I think that, just starting small and slowly increasing your security posture is the best way to go.
Yeah, starting small will help you further understand what sort of issues you might be facing with your systems, and really pushing for or developing with security in mind throughout the entirety, as Jack said, is quite valuable. With certain of the vulnerability disclosure background also will help understand and develop understand how you can develop communication with hackers, and starting with enticing hackers to further testing your systems and things like that. It really will help if you do that.
And I can also imagine we have probably a few aspiring hackers in the room here. So what advice do we have for those that want to learn hacking or get into hacking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that bug bounties are a really great way to get into hacking, just because it gives you that chance to actually get experience testing on a real live system. So I think that that's definitely the best way to learn, just learn by doing. Beyond that, to kind of learn the basics, it does help to have experience with programming, say web development, to understand how things are actually working, and to just begin to start thinking about different ways that something could go wrong and vulnerability could pop up, and then learning different basic flaws that are out there. So HackerOne has a website, Hacker 101, where they go over basic vulnerability types and give you practice sites to test on. So I think that's a great way to get started, and then really dive into different programs that are out there and learn from there.
Yeah, just always start learning with the basic concepts and start testing and actually trying out on challenge websites. Like HackerOne has their own capture the flag websites that have you go through the basics of security and look for vulnerabilities, and really starting that process of diving deeper and understanding what you're looking for and how it can manifest into systems and all that.
Question from the audience. What are the most common security mistakes you see companies make?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of simple stuff out there that people still don't do well. Anything from like the most basic, like SQL injection, something that's existed for, I don't know, like 20 or more years and is pretty easy to prevent, but somehow organizations still have trouble with this. So I think, like I said before, at minimum, developers should have an understanding of this, know when they're interacting with the database, don't do this. So yeah, SQL injections, one of the most common. There's also definitely lots that are not exactly able to be picked up by a scanner. So something like just changing number in a URL so many times that could either return someone else's information or expose information some other way. But it's not necessarily something that a security scanner could pick up, just because they don't know that that information should be private. And I think that's, definitely one of the more common ones. It's called an insecure direct object reference, where you can access something just by changing an ID number. And time again, companies are vulnerable to this, just because that isn't easy to fix universally. And companies really need to think about how they're enforcing permissions in order to prevent that.
Yeah. SQL injection, any type of logic issues like insecure direct object references, and stuff like cross-site scripting is also quite common. It's something that can be easily mitigated with as Jack said, they're with security in mind throughout the entire process, understand how things interact with each other, how they could be abused, or functionalities could be modified to form malicious actions, like returning data that it shouldn't be returning.
And in terms of industries that have the most mature cybersecurity, like, do we have any opinions there?
Yeah, I think definitely companies in technology tend to be more forward when it comes to their security and are more secure as a result. So that goes along with, say, being a newer company, because a lot of times, say, old companies or, I don't know, universities tend to run on legacy software, and a lot of times the older the software is, the more vulnerable it is. So yeah, I would say that tech companies definitely, not every tech company is secure for sure, but tech companies tend to be more secure and they tend to develop software better. But yeah, across the board, everyone has vulnerabilities and just need to realize that only by testing your security time and time again, you can become more secure.
Yeah, technically, has always been more, I guess, more progressive on the actions of with security in mind, focusing on improving and securing their systems, and being more on jumping on the gun, so to speak, with harnessing hacker-powered security as well. And with other sectors, there's sometimes issues with companies being rather slow on the role to implement security policy, more proper like security policy, or implement vulnerability disclosure programs. Universities, financial industry as well has been some of the ones that have always been more slower on the roll with implementing vulnerability disclosure practices, or generally being more on top of it when it comes to security.
Another question from the audience here about why is bug bounty a better alternative to pen tests? And I don't know necessarily if it's an alternative to pen tests, but like what do we see as the differences between bug bounty programs and traditional pen testing?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, like Michiel said, they're not necessarily, like, it's definitely not either or, and they can complement each other really well. Like a strong organization runs both pen tests against their software and bug bounties. And I'd say the fundamental differences are that, well, if you just think about the model of them, pen tests incentivize you to look at a system for a certain amount of time. Bug bounties incentivize you to find impactful vulnerabilities. So what tends to happen is that pen tests can, say, cover a lot of different areas of your software, but they may not go deeper. They don't really have an incentive to really find and exploit difficult vulnerabilities, and they don't provide that level of depth that bug bounties might have. Likewise, bug bounties are really great for going really deep into a specific system and encouraging people to find what really matters, but they don't provide as wide of a coverage. You can't ensure that someone's looked at everything. So I think that they need to go together, and it'll never be one or the other. But yeah, bug bounties definitely do excel in providing like higher severity findings and just incentivizing people to look at what really matters.
Yeah. Bug bounties can't replace pen testing. It can complement, as Jack said. And bug bounties tend to be more specific, wide-reaching, but also kind of specific in areas. With pen testing, it's more likely to have focused areas where you want more, extra focus on, to more heavily test on, compared to bug bounties, where you're not exactly sure, as Jack said, that everything has been touched, because certain areas might be more vulnerable than others comparatively.
And Alyssa, do you think that over like the last few years, do we think it's gotten easier to break into stuff or harder? Like, do we generally think that the overall security posture is improving, or has it become easier?
It's kind of it has gotten like a bit harder to break into stuff, but it's also as to a certain degree as well, getting easier as well, because there are some of the most common mistakes are still being recurring with a lot of companies. As as we mentioned earlier, with SQL injection, cross-site scripting, these very easy to miss vulnerabilities that are very common, but a lot of companies still continue to make, despite being very old issues that there is a lot of documentation on how to prevent. So it's kind of a mixed bag, really.
Jack, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, generally the state of security has gotten better, and yeah, I'm at least, yes, somewhat optimistic that companies, they definitely at least care about their security more, and I think that's a big first step. So there's a long way to go for sure, but yeah, I think in general companies are getting better at following best practices and doing what matters for security.
How many hours on average do you spend hacking and finding vulnerabilities?
Yeah, this has varied a lot for me. So I started college this past year, got like busier with school. So it was always something that I've done on the side, but there like isn't a set amount of time I do. So if there's a really interesting target, I might focus on it for a while and dive deep into it, or I might not hack for a few weeks and focus on school. So I think that one of the really great things about bug bounties is that you can be that flexible and you can do it when you want. So yeah, it really helps when like I don't have to have a set schedule and I can just start hacking in my free time.
Yeah, there isn't really a time for me either. I've spent as much as like 12 hours on a single program to as little as an hour, and that's the great thing about bug bounty. It's quite flexible. You can work on when you want and however you want to do it. And I've spent as little as an hour and I found vulnerability to spend as much as like 12 hours and found nothing. It can really vary.
It can be sometimes challenging to like keep challenging yourself to continue and find that vulnerability.
Yeah, it's something and kind of you dig in deeper and deeper. Eventually you might find something, but sometimes you might not. You kind of have to move on or not.
Yeah. You can go for a long time without finding anything, and then suddenly you see that little signal, the light at the end of the tunnel. And then,
Yeah, and then you can start digging at it more and more. And if you've dug along to it for hours, you might remember some information that you've seen before, and you might be applying it to that vulnerability to further leverage it as well.
if you're getting into hacking and there's like one skill or one area to learn first, what would that area be?
I think that one of the skills that I definitely use most is just Googling stuff. So if you see something funny that happens on a website, maybe an error or something, just Google it and see what comes up. I think that, yeah, there's tons of great resources out there, and just being able to find those is really great. So yeah, I think that just like having that curiosity and trying to look for, like, I don't know, if you see something that's suspicious, just wanting to dive deeper into that is really what makes people good at hacking. So just, yeah, after some time, yeah, I think you like kind of get a sense of where to look, but it all starts with just that spark of being curious and then like learning more and trying to dive deeper.
Yeah. It's always like that curiosity that sparks you to figure out what it does and how it does that. There's many times I've spent Googling error messages or specific nuances of how a system works just because I was wanting to try to further like deeper into it. That's like more or less what hacking is, the curiosity and wanting to further dive deeper and solve this complex problem, whether it's just to figure out if this error is exploitable or whatever.
What is your favorite hacking tool?
The one that I use all the time is called Burp Suite. I'm sure pretty much everyone who's into web security uses. It's really fundamental. It just acts as a proxy between your computer and whatever server you're talking to, and as you browse around, it logs that and lets you replay requests and see what happens. So really a lot of security isn't dependent on automated tools. At least right now, the tools aren't good enough to find the vulnerabilities that actually matter and can actually be exploited. So something like Burp Suite is really helpful just because it allows you to do whatever you want. It allows you to change requests in any way and test for whatever. So yeah, it just acts as a enabler to be able to test all sorts of vulnerabilities, and that's really powerful. But yeah, there is no like automated tool. I think that's especially important for organizations that may do a lot of automated scans. Just the fact that automated tools out there right now for finding vulnerabilities might find some really low-hanging stuff, but they're not going to find stuff that like a traditional bug bounty hunter or pen tester might find, just because the level of like intuition needed is beyond what any scanner can do right now.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. Burp Suite has been one of the most heavily used tools. It really does act like a desktop, like a tool for seeing how what requests are being made, and playing around with them as well, and just seeing how things interact and respond to basically the testing you do. And yeah.
So when you find a vulnerability, critical vulnerability submitted to the program, then it's probably not a fire and forget, right? So what are kind of the steps that you go through after that initial submission to the company?
Let's see. So I think that after the definitely submitting a report is only half the story, and there's a lot beyond just that. Everything from stuff on the company side that you don't even touch as a hacker, to working with the team to help them first verify that the vulnerability exists, and then to verify that's fixed once they have something out there. And a lot of times it might be a more obscure vulnerability and they need your input on how best to fix it. So yeah, there's a lot that goes on after just finding a vulnerability. And yeah, I think communication is definitely the most important part there, in being able to first convey that the vulnerability exists, and then working with the company to then after the fact verify that they've fixed it.
Yeah, it's very, and there's a lot to. Sometimes the company will even ask you to dig deeper to see how far this vulnerability could go, what the true severity of it could be in the wrong hands. And this could further reveal more issues that might not be picked up on if you didn't report on it before, if they didn't notice it through this vulnerability you reported. There's also being asked to test those patches that they apply to see if those patches can be bypassed or not, as well as just communicating with the company as well. It's just been the biggest thing to combine all of that, as you could say.
So outside verifying if the fix actually works, do you also help the companies fixing the vulnerability, recommending a path to fix it or anything like that?
Sometimes like an initial recommendation can help them where to fix it. Also just experiencing on the other side, like when a vulnerability comes in and doing what you need to do to fix it, that can be really interesting as well. So it's also, some cases, sometimes you might report a vulnerability in something that's open sourced, in which case you can see exactly where the flaw is in the code and tell them exactly what they need to do to fix it.
Yeah, but yeah.
So if you don't, if there's a vulnerability and you can't report it, you don't know where to report it. I've had many situations myself where I was in a position where I found a vulnerability and it's just kind of you don't know where to go to. It's kind of they don't have a program on HackerOne. They don't have an email address. Myself, I've tried a lot to disclose a lot of vulnerabilities to companies, and you try to email security at and then the domain name of the company, and it kind of comes back as a bounce. There's nobody there. Then maybe as a next step, you try to reach out to the CTO on LinkedIn, see if you can reach out to them and convince them that there's a vulnerability to fix. Ever had any experiences with that, and what kind of path did you take in trying to reach out to the company?
I've messaged them on Twitter. look at their support email to see if there's any sort of that they use for reporting like bugs in the website that are not necessarily security vulnerability, but like maybe design flaws or whatever. Because sometimes they will be responsive to that as well.
Yeah, usually, reaching out to employees at the companies or even through their support is effective, and that's good that they pass it on to someone who could deal with it. So yeah, most of the experiences I've had, reaching out, like even if there isn't a defined security contact, they still want to hear from you. And going through those other methods, say, finding someone on LinkedIn or finding a contact in common or going through their support tends to get to the right person. But yeah, there still unfortunately can be cases where it does just get ignored, in which case, no matter what you try, they just won't listen. And yeah, that can be difficult. So there is also an option, something I haven't done, but some researchers do, where you can publicly disclose a vulnerability before, or even if the company isn't aware of it, and that can, as you can imagine, get in a legal gray area, but sometimes that is the best option if they're not receptive. So yeah, I hope that I don't ever have to do that, because I hope that companies are always straightforward when it comes to their security and act in a way that lets us contact them easily. But yeah, that is always an option, and people have done that before.
And there's a question for me about how did you come up with the idea for HackerOne? That's kind of, it came from this problem that we're talking about right now. Me and my co-founder Jobert, we were in this situation a lot where we had to report vulnerabilities to companies that didn't have a process for it. And it was always a challenge. And we often went through the process and the challenge of trying to find the right contact, seeing if we could find someone on LinkedIn, emailing customer support, calling customer support. And typically, the answer at customer support is like, you're trying to reset your password? No, I'm saying that I can reset other people's passwords. Oh, here's an FAQ on how to reset your password. So that's obviously not the right place of where you should report vulnerabilities, but it was a very common response. We went through the steps of trying to reach out, but we also realized there's many other hackers that would rather probably say nothing. Because if you've stumbled upon a vulnerability, it means you were most likely looking, right? And were you authorized to look? Maybe you stumbled upon the vulnerability, but it could be presumed that you illegally were looking for a vulnerability. So we kind of thought there are probably many more hackers that just stay silent. They say nothing. Like they find a vulnerability and then they just leave it out there. And that was a prompt for us to say, we need to build something that allows companies to work with hackers, where it's actually an open communication process where you can submit vulnerabilities to, and you can work together, and you can work together on a fix, and hackers can help you verify the fix, and all these kind of things. So that's where it all started. What is the hardest hacking problem you've solved? Is a question from the audience. For me, it's definitely building HackerOne. I also see it as a hacking problem. Hacking is you creatively overcome some kind of limitation that is put in place. For us, the limitation was there was no way to submit vulnerabilities, so we're going to solve that. And how do we solve it? We built HackerOne. So that's kind of my answer there, but what is your perspective?
Yeah, don't have any specific examples, but I think there's definitely a lot of times where you might be looking at a website that you can tell probably has a vulnerability, but you're not exactly sure how to exploit it, and you can look at it for a while, might not have any luck, but yeah, sometimes you do end up finding a way through, and you do find a way to exploit it. So yeah, don't have specific instance I can think of, but yeah, a lot of times that does happen, and then sometimes also you don't find a way to exploit it, and then you can't really do anything with it. So I think that there's definitely a lot of cases where persistence is key, and just keep trying is really valuable to try to exploit something.
Yeah, sometimes when you are stuck on something, sometimes you'll reach out to other researchers to collaborate on the problem, see if they might know something you might not on issue, or might know how to exploit the vulnerability you found, and it can really provide a moment to learn for yourself as well, to understand how they might have found the issue or how they might have exploited it when you weren't able to.
We know, like we all said, there's no, like, money isn't the first motivation to start hacking, and it's not why we do it. And I also know from lots of other hackers, like, money is not necessarily the first reason for why people hack, but can you make a living doing this?
Yeah, there are definitely people who do bug bounties full time. And yeah, definitely is something that can be done. It is difficult, not just technically, but you are working by yourself, and you're just looking at website after website. But yeah, there are people who do this full time. I do it more as a hobby, but yeah, you can certainly make a living from doing bug bounties.
Yeah, definitely. It's something I do full time, so it's quite possible to do it full time.
Yeah, we also know on the HackerOne platform there are a lot of other hackers that have found jobs through hacking on bug bounty programs. So it's another way that you can get started and land a professional career in security as well. What is your favorite hacking movie? For me personally, it is Sneakers. I love the movie Sneakers. But any other favorites out there?
I'm bad at this. I think I've seen one. The only one was the movie Hackers, and I might have fallen asleep during it. I don't want to say for sure, but it's the only one I've seen, so I guess it's my favorite. Yeah.
And I'm really bad because I haven't seen any.
Yeah, it's funny how inaccurate most hacking movies are, right? They all show hacking behind a computer like this and like text scrolling over screens, and it's like so inaccurate. And sometimes we get, like at HackerOne, of course, we work with hackers, so journalists want to see how does a hacker hack, and they want to film that. It's just impossible. Like, how do you film a hacker hack? It looks really boring. It's just someone sitting behind a computer with like Burp Suite open, and you hack, and it just doesn't look that exciting. Not in the not like the movies.
Yeah, nothing with mashing away the keyboard.
Right. Like Hollywood just had to make it exciting, of course, to keep people paying attention. Yeah. Cool. So sometimes, like I've certainly had situations where I found a vulnerability, and then it's like very critical. Like you find like a remote code execution. You can control the whole system, and then like where do you stop? Like is that the moment you stop, or is there like another step you take after to kind of take advantage of the vulnerability you just found?
Yeah, so every bug bounty program will have terms about what they want you to do, and typically it consists of like only do testing that's needed to confirm the presence of a vulnerability. So if you find, say, remote code execution, only confirm that you can do it, but don't actually try to exploit it. So it's always best practice just to stop what you're doing, report, tell it to the company, and a lot of times they might say, oh, that's really interesting, we want to see what else you can do, and then you're authorized to try testing it more and see if you can actually exploit it. But usually just knowing that you can and demonstrating something basic is the first step, and then only go on if the company authorizes you to.
Yeah. Usually just following the rules of the scope as well, and sometimes we'll even mention in the report that I think that this could be further exploited and could be taken advantage of even further, and sometimes we'll ask for permission to see how far it can push the vulnerability as well. And so a lot of the time, the companies have been very receptive of that, and something I've done a lot with the authorization of the company.
And like, what are, like, when you look at an application where you're trying to decide whether or not you want to hack it, what are some of the early signals that you see which will make you think, okay, this is going to be easy, or this is going to be incredibly hard?
The first thing that I do is just like get a sense of the application as a user would. So go around, try to use it, see how that goes, and understand like really what matters to the company you're looking at. And then as for actually trying to identify vulnerabilities, there's a lot of indicators that might indicate that something's really bad, whether it's like testing for SQL injection. If you put a quote somewhere and the whole website breaks, that's pretty bad. Or if you change a number in a URL and you see someone else's information, that's also pretty bad. So just a lot of the most basic stuff, if they don't have that down, then it's not going to be good. So yeah, seeing like if the company actually just follows basic practices and then going from there.
Yeah. Just like stepping that, like I said, stepping through the program, and just looking how everything interacts with each other and seeing if there's any sort of easy to make mistakes or if there's any sort of issues that are very common or something that they might make a mistake on. Might usually so that there is probably deeper issues that are a lot more critical in nature that they might have missed on.
We live in a time where like hacking is hot, like we can legally hack, but there's also, of course, it's a skill that can be abused by criminals, and we see like election fraud. We see things like power grids getting attacked, and like all kinds of like cybercrime around the world. What do we think about that? Like, is there, well, there.
Yeah, I think that it's clearly something that more people are caring about, still not enough do, but it's increasingly becoming more of national focus, both in, like Michiel said, in our elections, our critical infrastructure. That's definitely a concern. We saw in 2016 that that's been exploited and will likely be exploited again. And even with companies, the rise of data breaches, the Equifaxes, or whoever, there's time and time again our personal information is being breached. So I think that every person needs to care about it because their information is on the line, and also our country's, say, democracy or infrastructure is also on the line. So it's something that we need to focus on. And I think that one thing that definitely will need to improve is, say, the policymakers who are making legislation related to cybersecurity, having an actual knowledge of how systems work goes a long way. And as of now, Congress is not very competent. We've seen with the Facebook hearing say that the questions they're asking are not anywhere near what someone competent would be asking. And we need to really have people there who can make informed decisions that will ultimately affect our security. So I think that, at a fundamental level, people being skilled in the technical aspect of security is really important. And if we can get that anywhere from all sorts of companies to Congress, that will go a long way in better informing the legislation we have that relates to security. So I think that we definitely need to do more there, but it's good that people are paying more attention to security.
So what is, if we, like, when you start hacking on a new program, is there like, you let them know about it, or do you kind of just get started and when you find something, then you'll let them know?
So with bug bounty programs, typically it's just a lot of companies just have it public and they say, if you find something, tell us. So the great thing is you don't need to get permission because they've already given you permission, or if they're a private program, then they invite you to hack them. So typically, you don't need to tell a company, hey, I'm going to do this. It's just after the fact. If you find something, you go and tell them, and then they pay you for it and they fix it. But yeah, you don't need to give advance notice typically or anything like that.
So in, like we've talked a lot about hacking like applications and software, but of course you can also hack people. There's things like social engineering, or like you can hack locks with things like lock picking. Do any of you do any social engineering or lock picking?
So the amount I've done is very limited. One reason is that it's hard to do that also legally, just because there aren't avenues for that. There have been some bug bounty programs that included social engineering, so that was always really great to not only test the systems but also the people and see how well that goes. And that can be fun when you're given permission to do that. So there's tons of different areas of security, anywhere from web to hardware to network, all the way to social engineering to the people who are actually behind that. And it can be a lot harder to fix those kinds of issues because it's a systemic issue across an organization, across how they view security, and just generally being more aware.
Yeah, I'm very limited with that too. I'm mainly focused on web applications. But security can cross in many fields, even to the physical locations of a company as well, in the cases of red teaming and things like that.
Yeah, I know from my personal experience with social engineering, it is very hard because you have to lie to people, and I find it very hard to lie to people. But it's a difficult position to just like deceive someone in order to gain something back. So it's very, very different type of hacking. Yeah. I want to thank everybody for coming out here and submitting all of your questions. And we'll be sticking around, so if you want to ask us more questions over here, you can come by, say hello, or thank you.
All right, thank you everybody for coming out. We're going to have a reception upstairs in the co-working space. These guys are sticking around as we just heard, but please give them a sec to grab a drink if they need to use the bathroom. They've been on stage for a little while. They'll be upstairs to answer all of your questions. Thank you.